Coming up on LevinTV, the border wall standoff exposes the Democrats' vile hypocrisy. The leftist propaganda is flowing like a river, and I'll discuss it all and give you the facts. It all starts now.
This is where freedom rings.
If you believe in America, if you believe in the Constitution empowers us. It's a new day. America's back. America's back, and America's going to get strong again. We're going to defend America, and we're going to defend our interests.
Liberty's voice, LevinTV.
Hello, America. I'm Mark Levin. This is LevinTV on blazetv.com. Now, the President of the United States is giving a speech about now to the nation, one that I encouraged him to give way back in November. You know, I drive into the studio, I listen to radio, and you ought to hear these guys. You know, I told him he should do it. You know, I told him he should do it. I did more than that. I actually contacted certain individuals at the White House back around Thanksgiving and said, speech to the nation. He hasn't done one yet. It's important. Talk about the border. They're going to shut down the government. Talk about that, and so forth and so on. And you know what? It's not, I don't sit here and say, well, they listened to me and they did it. I think it's the aggregate of information that the White House gets from a number of people, and then they make their own decision. But it's something that I felt strongly about, and I'm glad the president's doing it. Now, the networks had a debate. Should we allow this guy to do it? Because, you know, he lies all the time, and he misinforms and disinforms all the time, and maybe we should edit it. Maybe we should tape delay it. Or, you know, we got to make sure Schumer and Pelosi get to respond. And so, like no other president before, the media treat this president really like a second-class citizen. It's disgusting to watch. And yet they sit there, you know what? We're for freedom of the press, freedom of the press. No, they're not. It is a synthetic press. Do you know what that means? It's a fake press. I mean, they're propagandists, they're leftists, but they don't support freedom of the press. They would love if tomorrow Fox News shut their lights. They would love if tomorrow I and others were off of talk radio and talk radio didn't exist. So they're not for freedom of the press. So the president is going to talk about immigration, securing the border, the so-called government shutdown, hopefully put everything in context. But there's this issue called the National Emergencies Act. There's a National Emergencies Act that was passed in 1976. But there actually were laws passed before that, going back before Abraham Lincoln's administration, giving rather significant power to the executive in cases of emergencies, whether it's Mother Nature, or whether it's war, or whether it's just very, very serious events, empowering the president to act unilaterally, but with these caveats. He could still be taken to court to challenge what he's doing, and also Congress can pass a resolution, both houses, if they can pass a resolution, simple minority of both houses, a simple majority vote, they can stop the actions of the president too. So it's not like he's a dictator. There are some powers there that do concern me. You know, the power to seize private property, the power to direct industries to produce certain types of products. Some of this was used in World War II, World War I, the Civil War, again, under the predecessor laws to the National Emergencies Act, again, that was passed in 1976. So if the president does this, it's not like he's a fascist, he's acting on his own, he's going around Congress. Congress still has the final say if they want to reverse what the president says. But we need to keep something in mind. He's the commander-in-chief. Under Article 2, he is the executive branch. All the members of the House of Representatives on the Democrat side are trying to obstruct his ability to do his job under Article 2, which is to secure the nation, secure the border, maintain American sovereignty for national security reasons, to protect us from criminals, and also to uphold immigration law, which I'll get to in a moment. So it's not as crazy as some think. Some jerk-never Trumper posted, there's this great constitutionalist mocking me on radio, says, President should act unilaterally and declare a national emergency. The president really isn't acting unilaterally. As I said, this is a statute. He's acting under the statute. He has to make his case under the statute. And whether it's upheld by a court or Congress or not, I can't predict. But if you're not going to secure the border from floods of people, a flood, and they're really floods in plural, coming into this country by the millions and millions over the course of years, and the impact it has on law enforcement and and crime in our communities, the impact it has on our economy, the impact it has on local property taxes with public schools and law enforcement. We go on and on and on. It's a significant issue. And of course, I expect the Democrats and the media to oppose this. You know, they really do believe in the Constitution, especially when it came to Obama and DACA, where he wrote legislation effectively, instituted it on his own, knowing it was unconstitutional, to give temporary legal status to hundreds of thousands of individuals who are here illegally. Well, yeah, that doesn't count, as he did other things illegally. Take the Iran deal. He bypassed the treaty clause of the Constitution with the help of that clown Bob Corker, who, thank goodness, is no longer in the Senate. They turned the treaty clause upside down. They turned it into just another deal, and they made it incredibly difficult, in fact, impossible, to stop what the president was doing, selling out to Iran and handing billions and billions of dollars to them. They don't have a problem with that. They don't have a problem when he violates separation of powers. They don't have a problem when the Constitution's violated at all, unless they feel it's not to their benefit. Not to their benefit. So here's the president who says, look, you know, I could call a national emergency to build a wall if I want to. And he's not just saying this, shooting from the hip. He's obviously talked to White House counsel. They're probably going to talk to the Office of Legal Counsel at the Department of Justice. He's going to get the best minds, legal minds in the government to provide him with his with advice on this. Not Adam Schiff or Nancy Pelosi or Jake Tapper. Let's take a look. Go.
Have you considered using emergency powers to grant yourself authorities to build this wall without congressional
approval? All right, let's stop. He's not granting himself authorities to build the wall. It's a statute passed by Congress. It's a statute. Go.
And second,
yes,
on
I have.
Mexico, you have.
Yes, I have. And I can do it if I want.
So you don't need congressional approval to build the wall?
No, we can use them. Absolutely. We can call a national emergency because of the security of our country. Absolutely. No, we can do it. I haven't done it. I may do it. I may do it. But we can call a national emergency and build it very quickly. And it's another way of doing it. But
let's stop here. And just so you know, because the press won't give you any context, this has actually been done by modern presidents since 1976, dozens of times. Not in this context, but in other contexts. Floods, hurricanes, cutting off funds to Iran, cutting off funds to Libya and so forth. So it's been done for a variety of reasons. It's been done several dozen times by prior presidents, Democrat and Republican. Go ahead.
if we can do it through a negotiated process, we're giving that a shot.
So is that a threat hanging over the Democrats?
I never threaten anybody. But I am allowed to do that, yes.
Second question.
Called a national emergency.
And it's amazing how little the press really knows about any of these things. It's all there on the internet. Let me give you an example. I did some research before this program. I pulled up from the Congressional Research Service their latest opinion on this from August 2007, and I read it. The Congressional, emphasis Congressional Research Service. And they explain the law there, and they explain some of the exceptions where a president can act. And it's available to anybody, including members of the media if they choose to read it, which they don't. But there was an excellent piece in USA Today the other day by William Cummings and John Fritz. So does the president have the authority to declare a national emergency and direct resources to the border? And so they ask, Trump can surely test whether he has the power to declare a national emergency for this purpose, said Kim Lane Schlepp, oh well, a professor at Princeton University Center for Human Values. The National Emergencies Act allows him to declare a state of emergency without approval from anyone else, but then he has to stay within congressionally delegated emergency powers after that. That's true. It's what the law says. The 1976 National Emergencies Act was passed in the post-Watergate, post-Vietnam era to create more structured procedures for the president's use of emergency powers. You understand, this law was passed to constrain and constrict what a president can do. And he still has substantial authority because there were disparate laws in the past, or presidents acted claiming constitutional authority to act as the executive. It goes all the way back to before Abraham Lincoln. Under that law, that is the 1976 law, the president can cite the specific emergency powers he is activating under existing statutes. According to the Congressional Research Service, there are hundreds of provisions of federal law delegating to the executive extraordinary authority in time of national emergency. That is a quote from the Congressional Research Service. Under the powers delegated by such statutes, again, this is from the 2007 report, President may, and I don't like some of this, by the way. I don't like some of this. Seize property, organize and control the means of production, seize commodities, assign military forces abroad. Listen to this one. Institute martial law, seize and control all transportation and communication, regulate the operation of private enterprise, restrict travel in a variety of ways, control the lives of United States citizens. That is a quote from the Congressional Research Service. I have a problem with the vast majority of that. What do you say? But when it comes to a wall, that's not a private sector responsibility. Securing the country, securing the border, building barriers, walls, steel walls, double fences, whatever it is a uniquely federal government responsibility. And under our Constitution, overseeing that, implementing that, is a uniquely presidential responsibility. So if the President of the United States were to trigger this statute, if he had a basis for triggering the statute, it can be challenged in the courts and challenged by Congress. But in the first instance, if he triggers it, he's doing it as president and commander-in-chief with respect to maintaining our sovereignty. He's not seizing private property. He's not organizing and controlling the means of production. He's not seizing commodities. He's not instituting martial law. He's not seizing and controlling all transportation and communication, regulating the operation of private enterprise, restricting travel, controlling the lives of United States citizens, on and on and on. Yet they say under certain circumstances he can do any or all of that. So what happens in the era of Trump is the media, working with the Democrats, hype what Trump is up to. It's like he's the greatest threat to freedom of the press ever. No, he's not. We've had two sedition acts, one in 1789, one in 1917, one under John Adams and his party, one under Woodrow Wilson and his party, that closed down newspapers and imprisoned reporters. Donald Trump doesn't even think about doing that. We had during the Civil War, I mean, it was an exceptional circumstance, a president of the United States that directed two New York newspapers to be shut down and their publishers and editors to be put in a federal prison. Now, that was quickly reversed, but still, over 200 newspapers were closed by the president's cabinet and generals, and Lincoln acted like he didn't know a whole lot about it, but he knew a lot about it. During the course of the Civil War, you can argue the improprietariness of it. That's fine. But I'm saying that happened. During Franklin Roosevelt's administration, he was threatening newspaper publishers and columnists all the time. He, like Woodrow Wilson, had a whole propaganda regime going on. And of course, we know about Barack Obama surveilling AP, surveilling Fox News and James Rosen. We know about them trying to imprison James Risen, an investigative reporter for the New York Times, and so forth. Trump's not done any of that either, yet you would think he's the Genghis Khan of the anti-freedom of the press presidents. He's not. He speaks. He calls out a news outlet. He calls out a reporter. He challenges them. He calls them fake news. My God, we've never seen anything like this. Oh, my God, we've never seen anything like this. Of course you have. It's just all phony. The president can declare an emergency, in this case, as an immigration emergency under the Immigration and Nationalization Act. That's what they're saying right here. An immigration emergency is defined as, quote, an influx of aliens which either is of such magnitude or exhibits such other characteristics that effective administration of the immigration laws of the United States is beyond the existing capabilities of immigration authorities in the affected area and areas. Doesn't that seem to meet the conditions? It certainly does to me. We're being overwhelmed. Other factors that determine if an immigration emergency exists include the likelihood of continued growth, in the magnitude of the influx, an apparent connection between the influx and increase in criminal activity, high demands on law enforcement agencies, and other circumstances, I quote, that are defined by the Attorney General. You don't have to have all those conditions. One condition is enough. So I think the president would be within his statutory right to do this under the National Emergencies Act and the Immigration Act and Naturalization Act. And so this is not a constitutional question in my view. It's a matter of statutory interpretation. So circling back, so when this Never Trumper posts, here we have this great constitutionalist, he thinks the president can act unilaterally. Even one of my friends, a former prosecutor, was on fire. We don't run our government this way. Why don't you read the law? Why don't you look at our history? Why don't you understand this has been triggered before? This is very frustrating to me, and I'll mention it now, and then about 2 or 3 weeks from now, they'll all repeat what I've said, they'll echo what I've said, and then they'll tell you, remember when I said, and I told you you could use the emergency, when they never have. So you heard this here first. But let's go on. We have Adam Schiffless, a.k.a. Adam Schiff, response to Trump stating he has the power to declare an emergency under these circumstances. Here we have him on CNN, of course. Go.
One of the things that Mulvaney and I were talking about was the deliberations about the president potentially invoking emergency powers to fund the border wall.
Now stop here. I can assure you that at this point, on January 8th, Tapper never read the statute, nor the history of presidents using this power. I can assure you he never did. So they want to create the impression for their viewers, which is basically the Democrat base, that, oh my God, here we have the despotic Trump yet again lashing out. Go ahead.
What do you make of that? What do you think?
Now, here you go. What do you make of that? So what he basically does is make a statement. I'm concerned about this, and then he puts a question mark behind it. And of course, he chose Adam Schiff to give a response. Everyone knows what Adam Schiff's going to say. He's a lapdog for the left. Go.
I make of that really threatening talk from the president that he doesn't have the power to execute. Look, if Harry Truman couldn't nationalize the steel industry during wartime, this president doesn't have the power to declare an emergency and build a multi-billion-dollar wall on the border. So that's a non-starter.
Yeah. One has nothing to do with the other. Once again, I will explain. The president already has constitutional authority to secure the border. That's part of his responsibilities as the commander-in-chief and, of course, as the head of the executive branch. So we're not talking about the private sector. We're not talking about nationalizing temporarily or otherwise an entire industry of the United States. So the fact pattern is completely different. Would you expect anything different from Adam Schiff being on CNN? Of course not. Then we have another legal expert who goes by the name of Willy Geist. He's one of the remaining panelists on the Joe Scarborough show, Morning Joe, who hasn't been obviously sexually harassing anybody. And he's on there. And so the Morning Joe, who's absolutely lost his mind, he's gone insane. I've always argued he's been insane, but he's clearly gone insane. He wants to know from Willy Geist what he thinks about this. Very predictable. Go ahead.
Mike Pence, the Vice President of the United States, lying to the American people again, saying that there were 10 a day. No, there were 6 in an entire year in the latest data.
Okay, stop. Footnote. Chris Wallace of Fox was questioning Sarah Sanders about this. They found 6 terrorists in a 6-month period. It's not 10 a day, is what he's saying. And what Pence had said before this is there's really 2 categories. There's people of interest where they need to do additional background checks because they pop up on the radar screen as potentially extremely dangerous, so it takes time to investigate them. And then flat out 6 terrorists. And I'm thinking to myself, 6 terrorists they caught? How many got through? I mean, the southern border is a sieve. How many got through? And 6 terrorists. How many were there on 9/11? Twice that many? 3 times that many? Doesn't take many to do an enormous amount of damage. So here they are again, playing games, semantical games, statistical games. We have thousands and thousands of people who've crossed this border who've committed crimes. Some have come back multiple times who committed crimes before. This isn't a joke. This is a serious matter. When you live in Manhattan, in or around Manhattan, when you live in or around areas, metropolitan areas on the eastern seaboard and so forth, this is your attitude because you've never been to McAllen, Texas. You've never been to El Paso. You don't work those places. You don't know those places. And of course, just to sit back in your studio, your air-conditioned studio in Secaucus, New Jersey, or wherever they are, MSNBC, and to just say, well, there's only 6 terrorists? Takes 1. And there were only 6 that were caught. And then again, as I say, there are people of interest who are considered potentially enormously dangerous. Go ahead.
That was passed along. You have the head of the Department of Homeland Security lying about thousands. You have the President of the United States lying about thousands.
This is just really awful, where a guy like this is given a platform day in and day out. See the moniker? NBC News. NBC News. See the moniker on the right? MSNBC. And they have the peacock. This is not news, ladies and gentlemen. NBC News. And this one's lying, and the vice president's lying, and the president's lying, and the cabinet secretary's lying. And they're all lying because they don't agree with Joe Scarborough. Go ahead.
You have Sarah Huckabee Sanders, the president's spokesperson, lying about it.
Incredible.
And they're all doing this, lying about a crisis on the southern border, just like they lied about the caravans, just like they're lying
Nobody
about...
lied about the caravan. This is really insane. Go ahead.
The gang members flooding across the southern border, all to justify this.
There are gang members flooding across the southern border. They're called MS-13. And they're based in El Salvador. And they are destroying certain communities on Long Island and Sterling, Virginia, and parts of Los Angeles and other parts of the country. This isn't a joke. This is reality. These people live in a bubble. Go ahead.
Government shutdown, and all to justify the president going on tonight, making up an emergency so he can build his
By the way,
wall.
who is the breathless noisemaker in the background? Is that Mrs. Scarborough? I think it is. Go.
Along the southern border, it's outrageous.
It is, Joe. And here's the quote yesterday from the president on Twitter: there's a humanitarian and national security crisis on our southern border. Let's be as clear as we possibly can be. Yes. There is no national security crisis at the border.
Well, that's it, ladies and gentlemen. This geek who says there's no national security crisis. President doesn't know. The head of Department of Homeland Security, she doesn't know. The Border Patrol doesn't know. ICE doesn't know. Other law enforcement-related entities, they don't know. But this MSNBC spokesidiot, he knows. Joe Scarborough, he knows. Really quite appalling. Now, it's funny how we treat our country versus how we treat these centers of elitism, the biggest one being, of course, Washington, D.C. And here's what I wanted to share with you. There's a Washington Post piece from really 12 years ago, 13 years ago. Ubiquitous security barriers get a fashionable flourish. But here's the part that caught my attention. The nation's capital is, of course, the bollard capital. You know what bollards are? They're these cement protective devices to try and keep vehicles away from buildings. Let's see here. Thousands are here. Thousands are here surrounding buildings, monuments, museums. At about $7,500 apiece, they absorb a chunk of the area's Homeland Security budget. So there are thousands of them in Washington, D.C. Now, where are they? What are they doing? Legions of styles are proposed monthly. Tapered bollards are at the Lincoln Memorial, metal boxes embossed with the veins of leaves for the National Museum of Natural History. How about basket weave bollards at the National Museum of the American Indian? Fluted bollards with the presidential seal in Lafayette Square and with the congressional seal on Capitol Hill. They can be cemented 8 feet below ground, or it can be removable or retractable. Some can drop or sprout in a 3-second whoosh all over the Capitol. Here's an interesting piece from, where is it from? From a security website. If you visited the U.S. Capitol recently, you may have overlooked an understated yet significant architectural feature. The 150-acre Capitol Hill campus, where, of course, the Capitol building is and the Senate and House buildings are, is ringed with about 7,000 waist-high steel posts or security bollards. The bollards blend well with their surroundings, but their real purpose is security. Installed shortly after 9/11, they can stop an 8-ton truck from plowing into them at 50 miles per hour. And following 9/11, many U.S. cities quickly installed security bollards and other physical barriers at major landmarks and Capitol buildings. Some barriers deemed excessive were later removed, but recent vehicle-related attacks across Europe and in the U.S., notably New York City, have prompted resurgence. Mark, what does this have to do with anything? You're securing your facilities. You're securing your towns. You're securing your museums. You're securing your monuments. Can't we secure the border for the sake of the American people? And look at this. Another big boost for Capitol Hill security spending. This is from last June. A year after baseball shooting, Capitol Police keeps growing and cyber attack worries intensify. At a time when steady, significant growth for the Capitol Police looks sure to continue. Members of Congress are confessing heightened concern they'll never be altogether shielded from threats both old-fashioned and high-tech, no matter where they are. But how about the rest of the people? The Senate and the House passed bills allocating more than $450 million for the congressional force in the coming year. Now think about this. $450 million for Capitol Police, for Congress. We're talking about $5.7 billion for security barriers along a southern border that's well over 1,000 miles, closer to 2,000 miles. And they're trying to protect another 700 to 900 miles. You can see how little that money is in context. The bulk of the latest supplement would pay for hiring 6 dozen additional cops and a score more civilian personnel, continuing plans to grow the force, that is the Capitol Police Force, 20% in the final 5 years of this decade. But at more than 2,300 sworn officers now, Capitol Police is already bigger than the departments, that is the police departments, in San Francisco or San Antonio, and would rank 12th on the roster of the nation's biggest municipal forces. In other words, when it comes to protecting themselves, members of Congress, the sky's the limit. They'll spend anything, and they'll do it immediately and on a bipartisan basis. When it comes to protecting the country, our southern border, that's not to say everybody who comes through is a criminal or a terrorist, any more than it's to say anybody who visits the Capitol is a criminal or terrorist. They're trying to protect themselves from maybe 6 terrorists who try to come in. Well, you know what? Why don't we try and protect the country from terrorists, criminals, and others who try to come in? Not to mention the economic impact it has, and quite frankly, the cultural impact it has on our country when people refuse to assimilate, and when a country, through its corporations and government, doesn't want people to assimilate. Why? Because balkanization keeps Democrats in power. It keeps media getting ratings with identity politics. Now, there are politicians, of course, out there who like to build walls for themselves around their own homes. That's not to say they can keep out all predators. But, you know, when you're a predator and you see a house without a wall and you see a house with a wall, you tend to go for the house that doesn't have a wall. In other words, you tend to go to the house where the entry, where the break-in is likely a lot easier. And when there's a wall, it's a lot harder. But at least the people who live inside the wall, they think it's a deterrent, right? They don't think, hey, you know what? This is 4th century technology. Anybody can just use a ladder and climb it and jump over. What's the point of having a wall? A wall is immoral. A wall is immoral? An inanimate object is immoral? Well, there you go. So says Nancy Pelosi, who supports partial birth abortion and full funding for Planned Parenthood as they harvest the organs of babies. But that's a whole other story. Anyway, so it's immoral to have a wall unless, of course, you're a very wealthy Democrat, politician or former politician. Then it's moral. Let's look at this. Benny Johnson from the Daily Caller attempts to find out, can I see this 10-foot wall outside the Obama home in a spiffy area of Washington, D.C.? Let's take a look. Go ahead.
Is there a 10-foot wall in front of Obama's house? I don't know, because there are like 7 walls preventing me from even finding out. So we are here right outside of the, not really outside of the Obama's house, actually, at the road where Obama lives is completely blocked off. Both sides of the road is blocked off, which is very...
That's so immoral and un-American. Go.
Very interesting. You can't even drive up to the front of the house. We're going to see if we can walk up to the front of the house, but there's a sign over here that says no walking, and there's a police car, and there's a barricade. So we were trying to show you if there's a wall outside of Obama's house, trying to fact check that. But I'm wondering if we could even get past this wall. It's like a very big barricade and an armed officer. We can't even tell you if there's a tall wall in front of his house. I mean, we can show you some recent photos, which we'll play in the video right now, and I'm 6 foot tall. The recent photos will show a security gate, it'll show guards, it'll show Secret Service outside of the house. But FedEx can come through. Hey, look at that. You can't even get to the front of Obama's house to see how big the gate is, even though you can sort of see it from the street here. We have fencing, like what looks like
That's
3
quite a
to 4
neighborhood. Did you see the embassy for Afghanistan? Go ahead.
layers of fencing, some of it iron, some of it concrete. And then you have...
Wait a minute, iron and concrete? That's so 4th and 5th century. Go ahead.
Multiple other concrete barriers going down the street here. That's similar to what we saw on the other side. So aside from that, you have orange cones, and then you have, again, God bless them, our United States Secret Service here, who is going to control who goes in and out of the street. And boy, do they have it blocked off well. We're trying to simply demonstrate that if you want to protect your family and you want to protect the things that are dear to you, then security and walls do work. And the former president has provided those things, and all American families should feel that secure as well inside of their own country. Protect the things that you value.
No, but we're the plebes, you see. We're just the rabble. And we need to protect our leaders, our former leaders, our members of Congress, Hollywood, actors and actresses. We need to protect our mayors, our city council. But when it comes to ranchers and farmers, or when it comes to people in our inner cities who are confronting individuals, they don't know where they're from and so forth, that, you know, whatever. That doesn't matter. What are you, a white supremacist? So I would have to ask that question of all these politicians with their walls. Are they white supremacists? Are they racists? What's the problem with their 4th and 5th century technology? All you need is a 10-foot ladder. You could jump the fence, right? It's so disgusting that we even have to go here, but we do. Let's take a look at the actual Obama wall. Now, there's one, and that little thing there, that's where the Secret Service hang out. Next one. There we go again. Yeah, man of the people. Let's take a look at, while we're having fun, at the Clinton property. They have a wall too. Oh, excuse me, it's a fence. That looks pretty high, 10 feet high. Yeah, so all you need is a 11-foot ladder. So says Stempy Hoyer. Let's take another photo, take another look. There you have the whole compound surrounded by fences because they may believe in sanctuary cities, but they don't believe in a sanctuary homestead. No walls. Illegals are free to travel around their property. Criminal illegals are free to travel on their property. They won't call in any federal officials and so forth. So they don't want the protection for the nation that they want for themselves. And what that means is they don't want the protection for the people of the nation that they demand for themselves. It's pretty outrageous. Now let's see if Nancy Pelosi has an immoral wall. She and her husband are worth tens of millions of dollars. Now, this is a vineyard they have. They have multiple properties. This is a vineyard that they have. You notice they have a beautiful stone wall. It is nice. And they have gates out front. Now, anyone can jump the wall. Anyone can jump that wall. So why does she have a wall? Well, she wants to make it at least psychologically clear. This is private property. You're not allowed to come here. More wall. They got wall all around their vineyard. By the way, it's also non-union. Their vineyard workers are non-union. Just thought I would point that out. So she has a wall, Obama has a wall, Clinton has a wall, but we don't get a wall because it's immoral. That looks like an immoral stone wall to me. Isn't that immoral to you? I wonder if she's a white supremacist. Do you think she's a white supremacist? At least when it comes to the vineyard, I think she is. Now let's talk about this speech tonight very briefly. We have a joint statement being put out by Pelosi and Schumer last night demanding equal time. Now, keep something in mind. The President of the United States exists under Article 2. There was a lot of debate at the Constitutional Convention, and most of it took up the issue of this executive that they created. It's a very unique position. The president and the vice president are the only two people elected by the entirety of the nation. That is intentional. And even there, it has to go through an electoral college process, which, of course, the Democrats want to destroy. Members of the House are members of specific, apportioned districts. Just because Nancy Pelosi is elected Speaker, she's nothing more or less than one of 435 House members. Same with Schumer. Just because he's elected out of New York, one of our 50 states, it doesn't mean he's special when it comes to the Constitution. He's one of 100. That's it. Good, better, or worse. His party makes him their minority leader. So they are not on the equivalent standing. They're not on the same standing as the President of the United States. So the President wants to give a speech to the nation. The networks balk initially. And they say, okay, fine. Then there's some debate on CNN on whether or not he should be censored, or whether it should be tape delayed so it can be edited, or whether or not it should be covered at all. But at a minimum, the Democrats should be able to get their say. Why? Who's Pelosi and Schumer? They're not the president. They're not single individuals who are more uniquely important under our constitutional system. But of course, they're going to get their say because the media want them to get their say. Now, what is this statement that they put out last evening? Now that the television networks have decided to air the president's address, which of his past statements or any indication will be full of malice and misinformation. These are really hateful people. Democrats must immediately be given equal time. Well, they gave him more than equal time. They'll be given endless time because that's the way it works. See, you've got this guy, Joe Lockhart, who used to be a spokesman for Clinton. Remember how he was covering up for Clinton and all his perversions in the Oval Office? So good was he at covering up Clinton's perversions and lying through his teeth day in and day out that the NFL decided to hire him. He became senior vice president for communications. And so when the players were taking a knee, and by the way, they don't seem to be taking a lot of knees lately, which is why their ratings are going up, I think. He made excuses for them too, but eventually the NFL got rid of him. And it was Lockhart who leased, I believe, that very home, rented it to the Obamas early on, and I believe they bought it from him. If I'm wrong, but I believe that's what happened. So, of course, he's very important. It's very important to make sure these former Obama, Clinton employees, these has-beens, these Trump haters are on there to comment and give, of course, objective journalistic input into what's taking place. Here's what he had to say about Trump giving an Oval Office speech. Go.
Secretary of Department of Homeland Security, Kirstjen Nielsen.
That's not Joe Lockhart. That is Allison Camerata. Go ahead.
In June of this past year, said, I will quote her tweet, "We do not have a policy of separating families at the border, period." On that day, 2,000 children had already been separated from their parents. There were more to come. We can't trust them. They've proven it time and again. So tonight, these 7 or 8 minutes from the president, it's really hard to know what the point will be and what we should take away from it.
Yeah, and the justification for a national emergency has been built largely on the fact that terrorists have been pouring over the border, the southern border. And I think
the president hasn't even given his speech yet, and they're putting words in his mouth. Camerata, of course, drops all context about separating children from their parents, because in some cases they weren't parents. In some cases they were kidnappers. In some cases they were coyotes. In some cases they were drug carriers and so forth. In some cases they were using those kids. And so the reason they were separated isn't because we like to separate children from their parents, it's because we're trying to figure out if they are their parents and what's going on in order to protect those children. Remember, we didn't drag these kids over the border into the United States. They were brought into the United States either by legitimate parents or other people, and it's left to us. It's left to the Border Patrol and eventually ICE to sort it out. But none of that seems to be part of the equation when it comes to Allison Camerata, the constipated news network, which is CNN, and slugs like this. Go ahead.
Out last night that the number isn't 4,000, that there was as few as 6 people who were stopped.
And again, there's really a distortion of the information. 6 people, we call them terrorists. They're subhuman cockroaches. That's what they are. So they stopped 6 terrorists. Shouldn't we be applauding that? It's too bad we didn't stop all the terrorists before 9/11. But again, the 4,000 relates to people of interest, and by people of interest, they mean people who could cause serious harm, who they have to figure out who they are. So they smirk and they laughed, and we don't need a wall and all the rest. It's just a propaganda machine. Go ahead.
And we don't even know if they're terrorists. They just may have the same name as a terrorist. I mean, it really is nonsense. So you have a national emergency based on fiction. And that's the problem for putting this on the air.
You know, I'm going to end this way. We've had enough of the propaganda. When Bill Clinton was president, I believe it was in 1996, he promoted and Congress passed what was considered the strictest immigration law up to that point. And it included almost every single thing President Trump is promoting. Almost every single element of the Trump proposal was in that bill, except it's been updated to modern times to deal with the gaps and the failures that are taking place today in the 1996 law. He was Clinton's spokesman. He knows this. If Camarada did any amount of research, or if their very expensive research staff did any amount of research, they would know it. And of course, while they mock this administration, they mock this president, they mock these ideas, we all know that 5, 8, 10, 12 years ago, the vast majority of Democrats supported it. That 1996 law passed with 307 votes. I know this by memory. 307 votes in the House of Representatives. So strongly united were Democrats and Republicans that they didn't even take a head count, a roll call in the Senate. It passed by voice vote. 307 in the House, voice vote in the Senate. Clinton signs it. The strictest immigration law in modern times, beefing up security and all the rest of it. The problem is it's not enforced, of course. We have sanctuary cities, which nullify federal law. We can go on about that another day and another time. And they know this. And so 10, 15 years ago, Barack Obama endorsed what President Trump is proposing. Schumer endorsed it. Pelosi endorsed it. Maybe not every piece of it, but the vast majority of it. And today they don't. And so you get this snide, condescending mocking from people with very, very low IQs. All right, that's it.